This is Brian the Writer, and you are listening to Let's Find Out with Diego.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest is an author and researcher diving deep into UFOs, consciousness, and the mysterious afterlife, fueled by a captivating alien abduction experience in 1989. He has fearlessly delved into the enigmatic realms of UFOs, alien encounters, and psychic phenomenon. Known for his riveting books and articles on this subject, our guest's boundless curiosity has led him to share his insights on national television, documentaries, and radio shows. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out, author of the book Terrestrial Trespassers, Philip Kinsella. Philip, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. Our schedules and the planets are finally lined up, and you're on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Diego, it's an honor. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very grateful.
You know, I am as well. We've been trying to set this up for months, and sometimes things happen where you have other commitments, I have other commitments, but we have you on now. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here in West Virginia, a beautiful Sunday night over there in the UK. So let's get into something, because as during the pre-interview, I was telling you about that I've heard a few of your presentations in other locations, and your story is very interesting, and I wanted to really get into it because I know you've told this story many, many times. Terrestrial Trespassers, it covers a lot about your experiences in your life from a young age up into adulthood. Mm-hmm. For the listeners of Let's Find Out, if you don't mind, can we go back in time a little bit about that experience you had in the winter of 1989? I reckon it's something that it's definitely changed your life forever, as it should.
Yes, of course. I mean, the initial period of 1989 was a bizarre time. I mean, I wasn't really open to UFO contact, although my twin brother and I had been witness to a silver orb the size of a football with our maternal grandmother. And that was in 1982, I believe. I think we were aged 13 at that time. And that was in broad daylight. And of course, at that point, we didn't know what it was. We didn't even consider that it was a spaceship because it was too small. I mean, you expected something larger. But it obviously was an example of perhaps the Foo Fighters that were in the World War II that followed Allied aircraft. And of course, that was very strange. That was a level of high strangeness. And, we all remembered it, but it was all forgotten. It wasn't really spoken about. And then, of course, some years later, I then had what people term an alien abduction. That's the only way that we can term it. Because, and of course, that was in the village of Marston Mortain, 5 miles outside of Bedfordshire. We lived in a small cul-de-sac and quite a big house. And the experience happened there. Truly frightening. There were some events that led up to that experience that astounding. And there is another researcher, Pierre Sabac, who's put some parallels together with regards to that experience. I had come back from work, got the train from Bedford to Millbrook, walked the mile or so back home. It was roughly about 7:10, 7:15, and walked into the house, glass to the front of the house and through the hall and into the kitchen. And I was met by my twin brother and our dog, with, of all things, Benji, and my sister. And we were in the kitchen, and I was leaning against the cabinets, looking out across the hall where I'd just come through, a large hall. And my thoughts were, just about work. I just wanted to settle and calm down. My sister was to my far left and my brother was in the dining area, so he didn't have the full view of the hall because there's a wall separating that part. And then, of course, what happened was that the atmosphere became strange. It was almost like electric. And the dog started to react strangely. And then, of course, the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck started to come up. And my brother went into a trance. He literally, my identical twin brother was facing me, and he froze and looked up to the ceiling, and he said, "There's going to be an earthquake, or Grandma's going to die." Those were his exact words. There was no earthquake, and our maternal grandmother was still very much alive at that point. And then I noticed this light coming up to the glass of the house where I'd come through the hallway. And I thought that our mother had come back from work early, from a late shift, because the light was intense and started to grow in size, and this white light. And then I started to see the door, the frame, the glass all start to almost like bend, and my mind's screaming, "Well, that's not possible. That is impossible. That beyond our physics, we couldn't even replicate that." And my brother was still frozen in front of me, and my sister to my left. And then there was this being. The only way I could describe it was 3 foot in height. It was diminutive in size. It was all dressed in black, but it had a very large cranium. I thought it was wearing a motorcycle helmet. It wasn't, but it's the only way I could describe it. I could translate it. It came through the glass where the light had been and ran straight ahead into my brother's downstairs study and bedroom then, and disappeared. And the light returned to normal. My brother snapped out of it, and I said, "There's an intruder in the house." And then whatever it was had shot from the corner of where it went across the hall and up the stairs. And then I screamed, "There's an intruder in the house." And I pulled out a knife, and then, of course, we searched the house. There was no intruder. But the worst part was to occur in the early hours of that morning, where I found that I was floating on my back in the same area as to where this being had come through the door, and being pulled through the glass to the house, the glass doors, and outside giving a short description of this. And I was wondering how it was possible that my biological form was able to go through solid matter. And of course, at that point, when I'd been taken out into our very large garden, there were some UFOs up there, loads of them moving like lights. There was one that was stationary, and it's circular, like a disc, and it had no lights on it, but I could clock it. And as soon as I did, I felt like a whoosh, and I was pulled up to it so far, so quickly, and then bang, I blacked out. And the next part was the truly disturbing part. There are 2 other parts to this that really were quite difficult for me to deal with in terms of its reality, and also the physical marks that I had afterwards, and the trauma that I had. I don't want any sympathy, but it was me going through this. But I found myself in a dingy room. It was probably about, I don't know, not really large. I found myself naked on a bed. Seems like a medical bed, and I was strapped to the bed. And it was a little bit dark, but there was some light coming straight ahead of me, directly to the left, where there seemed to be some kind of opening. But there was some equipment or fixtures here to my right. But the worst thing was it was really hot, and it was like being in a sauna. And I awoke to find myself confused, dazed, not knowing where I was, what I was doing there. And when I turned to my right, there were these 3 tall, solid beings. I was embarrassed to say that the only way I could describe them was that they were reptilian. They were huge, and they were in this kind of like thicker mist, and they were moving side by side like this strange gate. There was no communication, but once I clocked them, my mind like, this ain't happening. But at the same token, I then discovered that there was something that seemed to be placed inside me and had been inserted into the lower abdominal region. And it felt organic within my lower abdominal region. It felt like it was there. I could feel it. And at that point, I just lost it. I just started to scream. And I don't know how long that went on for, to be honest with you. People say, how long? I have no idea. all I remembered is that when you're terrified of something, there's the time seems to dissipate. I thought, this can't be happening. This is not happening. The idea of benevolent contact is literally, I thought that would happen. This was not like this. The terror was incredible. And then when I yelled for them to take this thing out of me, when I looked on my right, they had gone, the three of them. And then I saw this small grey that was coming from the opening where the light was, and it was more of a creamy color. It wasn't like grey that people connect with. It was and it came forward, and then the thing that they put in me, or if they had put it in me, I don't know how they got that in me, was being retracted mechanically, I assume. And the grey came up. It was very no compassion. I was ordered to sit and to dress, which I did because my night clothing was on the floor, and I was to follow it to where it had come from, which was round ahead and to my left. And I found myself in this kind of like small corridor. I couldn't see the lights, but there was a lighting. It was a lot lighter from where I'd been, but I just wanted to get out. I had no idea where I was. I just wanted out. And we came to what I thought was a wall. And it wasn't a wall, because as soon as I came towards it, it disappeared. And there was a tree within my head, the image of a huge tree. I have no idea what that was there for, but I think I understand now. And the grey was just looking at me like, get out. And I'm like, you want me to just leave? Because I found that we were up a height and I could see the village, and it was becoming, when it's light, it's just becoming dawn. I could see the house from below, from above where I was on below, and there was another disc. This is the last part coming up here. There was another disc, a smaller one that was seemed to be by the house. And I thought, you want me to leave? You want me to go? You want me to just... And I felt this push, and then I floated through the air, and there were two other greys beside me. I was ordered not to look at them, and I thought that's really strange because I saw one of those critters on there. When I came to the ground, what faced me was the truly bizarre part. There was another grey, but it was different. I call him Noddy from, Enid Blyton's Creation, children's author from years ago. These greys had obviously disappeared. It's like I'm not allowed to look back, but this grey was standing in front of me. And my God, this was really powerful because this one was more humanized. It was about 4 feet tall. It was clad in a one-piece suit. It wore knee-length boots. It had this pointed hat on its head. Very pointed, but it was smart how it seemed to encompass its uniform. My brother has drawn it or illustrated it in the book. And it had a one-piece uniform on, and it had its arms folded. Its face was more pronounced, more of a point to the chin. His eyes were slightly larger, and the slit was a little bit more pronounced. The dots were there for the nose. I didn't remember seeing any ears. But it was the way it had its arms folded, and it's looking at me really, really angry. And as it looked at me, I felt like I was punched in my stomach, literally. And I'm floating off the ground, and I wanted to punch him. I really was so angry that I wanted to punch him, but I couldn't move. And I thought, you know what? This is crazy. This is insane. And then I had a light bulb moment, and I said to it, and people say, did you speak? Well, yeah, in here, it's like normal. How the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How is that possible? And it looked at me, shocked. And then it started to lift its head slowly up to the underneath of this craft that was just hovering above it. And then it started to rasp this unintelligible, mechanical, vocal language that I couldn't understand. And it reminded me of the voice synthesizer that my brother and I used to have for our ZX81. A cheetah one, and as it froze and looked, I then found myself coming very quickly, say crashing, but coming through the glass to the conservatory, through to the kitchen, through to the study bedroom, and then bang, I was then in my body, quote, in my body. And as soon as I woke up, I had a nosebleed, had to go to the bathroom and sort myself out. We're coming to the end of this now. The next day, my brother examined me. I had 3 triangular marks behind my right ear. We tried to take photographs of it with an instant Kodak Polaroid camera. It wouldn't come out. I had 3 marks on my right arm, and I had profuse nosebleeds to the right nostril. The doctors were going to cauterize that. And years later, I had problems with my right ear. At that point, I had no one to go to. I didn't know that anyone would understand this. And a few more pointers quickly before we go into the rest of this, Diego, is that another researcher a couple of years ago now put the parallels between what my brother had been doing at the the start of this strange phenomena, when he froze and looked up and spoke this ridiculous language. He was mimicking the grey, or the grey had mimicked my brother. We had missed it, as though there was some scrambling of a timeline or something like this. He was doing exactly what my twin brother was doing. And Pierre Sabac is a renowned researcher here in England, and I completely missed it. But we still don't know what it was about. But I then realized that there were two aspects to this phenomena: one that operated on what we consider to be a physical level of integration, and then a non-physical part. And that then fueled the opening of trying to make connections between these separate categories that we're still no nearer understanding. So that was the abduction. And I will say to you, lastly here, I can still remember every single detail as it happened. It has never changed. It is the same. And it's been with me since I was age 20. I'm now 55. And still no nearer in understanding. I've had people telling me what it is, how it is, and all the rest of it. No.
No, and it's interesting because this is one of the purposes of the show, is to try to gain understanding of why these things happen. Going back into something you said earlier in the story, you kind of answered the question, but I want to bring it to light, to where communications, while they were giving you the instructions on what to do, put your clothes on or walk over here. At first, there was nothing verbal. It was it mind speak, or sort of telepathy they were using? And yeah.
It's weird because, people that haven't had the experience will tell you how it is. When you are actually in the experience, it's very strange to explain, because it is just like you and me talking, but it's not done through a verbal connection. And if you go back and you say, well, did I verbally speak that? Well, I guess I was, but it was coming through here because that's how I was getting it. There was no feeling of like, oh, this is telepathic, or this is telling me this is how. It's almost like natural. And if we look at the human species in all aspects of the paranormal, we as a productive biological species seem to be so far removed from all other elements of the paranormal, in terms of spirit communication, Sasquatch communication, which has occurred, dogman communication, which has occurred, and these other areas. So you ask one of those, which I have spoken to within research, and they will say the same thing. So, but the communication, nothing from those three beings, what we call reptilians. And I have to say, I lived in shame. And even years later, when I had a contract with a publisher and I had to retract that part because they couldn't make any correlation between reptilians and greys. And I've been told time and again by people, well, the greys are subservient to the reptilians. And I've even been told by some people their high command's name, and I lose the plot. I've lost the plot enough where I am with regards to what happened. What I'm interested in is the theoretical aspects, the conscious aspects, trying to get to the meat of it, not about their high command. I'm sure they do somewhere or whatever, but, it gets kind of crazy, even though mine is crazy.
No, not so crazy, my friend, because these last few years, I believe the concept, or at least let's just talk about the whole theory of reptilians or reptoids. It seems to be like maybe they are the dominant alien species on Earth, because they are the most talked about things in every religion that's come across the globe. You're always going to wind up to the same thing, which is always some sort of reptilian creature. Are these? Do they come from somewhere else, or have they always been here on Earth, you think?
Well, that's a good question. And in terms of, our history or our current understanding of evolution is seriously flawed. And this is where I started to go into into antiquity, especially into Akkadian Sumerian research. And the archons, as we are known, seem to play an important role within our genus, even though we have been led to believe that the original manuscripts that we have today in terms of the holy books are the versions, which we know that within the ancient codices they're not. And I think most people's jaws will be on the floor if they found out the true connection with Genesis, that it is feasible to assume, and makes perfect sense, that we have been created by some form of intelligent species. It certainly makes more sense than the mere evolutionary theory that it just all happened by accident, or the Sunday school version of God, waving a wand and we're all here in less than 7 days. So I think that you're right. I think in terms of these reptilians, and let me tell you, and I will point out to you, I'm not here to scare anyone, and but I will tell you that I never want to see them again, because that there was no form of communication. But let me tell you that the absolute total fear that I had and the lack of empathy from them was truly shocking. It wasn't just being in that situation, it was also feeling and sensing that whatever these things were, had absolutely no care at all for the human. I was just a piece of meat. And that was the truly shocking thing, being helpless. I had no idea what they were, where they come from, why they were there. Nothing was explained to me. So in terms of that, this is where then, for many years later, I wanted to find out what it was that happened to me. I wanted to find out whether or not this was some kind of altered state of consciousness, that I had a dream where then I had marks from that dream. But the more I centered my thoughts upon this, I started to get this theoretical idea, and that blew open in 1996. And of course, that then led me into serious investigations, not only on the physical level of the ufology, when the objects come into our reality, but also the abduction phenomena, because looking into that reminds us that most of the experiences happened when other people are disabled, and the phenomena comes in on a much more stronger level of psychic integration, overpowering us completely. So, where we believe perhaps that UFOs come from another planet and they simply beam us up, I think there's a lot more involved in that. And I think the phenomena is much more closer to home than we have been led to believe. So sure, yeah, absolutely.
No, you're a man after my heart, because I have share a similar opinion as you. Interesting, because you mentioned something about how they were emotionless and basically directing the whole thing along with the grays, the classic grays or the short ones. So, being as with abductees, if we're looking at it, just treated like cattle or like lab rats or something like that. In my opinion, I'm sure others share the same thing, but I can't speak for them. I can only speak of my opinion. There seems to be that it's going to be a twofold question for you, so please bear with me. And sometimes my thoughts get taken away somewhere else.
Oh, with this subject matter, you can't help that, I'm afraid.
Yes, sir. And there seems to be, in my opinion, that there's a family history of these type of things. It goes from generation to generations. Some may have called it generational curses. Some may say that maybe they are tracking a certain bloodline to see how their experiments are doing throughout the generations. Prior to the experiences you and your brother and your sister had those years ago, before then, did you have any type of information or stories shared to you by either your parents, grandparents, or cousins before it happened to you?
Yes, there was my maternal grandmother, because we had the sighting of the silver orb, the size of a football, that we saw. And one of my uncles had also witnessed a UFO coming out of the ocean encased on sea many long years ago, a huge cigar-shaped ship. This was a man that was black and white, spade's a spade, didn't believe in anything. And when he witnessed that, he saw all these orbs coming out of the ocean into this huge cigar-shaped object that came out of the ocean as if they're all coming in and going into it. And he told me and my twin brother, and I nearly fell off my chair because I thought, my God. And also my cousin's husband has also had interactions with the orb type things, like a Foo Fighter. That's the only way I can describe it to you, but at night, and it was lit up and came over him as he had that experience. So yes, it seems to be prevalent within our family. And interestingly, another author here, Steve Aspin, He wrote a book called Out of Time. He's another good friend, and he believes there are some kind of intergenerational connections linked with this as well. And interestingly enough, blood, you mentioned that, which is prevalent, I think. So, it is interesting, and, I've let go now of the experience. There may have been some other abductions, at least Kathy Marden has stated that there could well have been some other experiences. And yes, back in my childhood, there were some very strange experiences, and a continuous dream that I had that kept playing out until I acknowledged it and wrote it down and found out where these big stones were, with regards to the connection with them. So I think once you twig or you acknowledge it, it seems to stop. I mean, the last experience that we had, incredible experience, was on the 9th of April 2016 at precisely 11:15 p.m. at night, with the appearance of 3 massive UFOs. That's another long story. And after that, nothing, absolutely nothing at all. But the phenomena is very strange. And I think that when it comes into our reality, because on the 9th of April 2016, at the sighting of those objects, when my brother and I had driven back, I drove us back from a meal, an early birthday meal, and my sister and my niece had gone off on their own to their village. And when I got out the car, my brother got out the car, and we looked up at the clear night. It was cold, but clear. The stars were out. These objects had descended. There was no one around. No one walking their dog. No one driving their car. Nothing. I wanted to grab someone to say, look at that. No one. So the phenomena is clever, I think, in the way that it orchestrates not just time, but also space. We didn't lose any time that night, but it did herald the appearance of a white helicopter that arrived the next evening, late evening, which circled our house 3 times. Interestingly, 3 times there were 3 objects. I don't know whether or not that was to throw people off the scent, or people do get confused with time, not with me now. Not then, not for a long time. Record everything. Abduction phenomena that occurred, no, I didn't make a date of it. I knew the time because I didn't think it would be important. And people have said to me, I want times, I want dates, like that will prove something. I say to you now, if I had a piece of the Roswell debris, which I don't have, and I had that and I said, I've got it, no one would believe you. It's just one of those things. But yeah, it's a good question, Diego, about the intergenerational connection. Most definitely, yeah.
No, and you're correct. Because this is one of the things where I've read and heard other people talk about it. That I like to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I think there is something to that, and which brings me to the most important part, at least I think, of our conversation, or at least in the UFO subject. There are those out there with the opinion, and I don't share this opinion that UFOs are, they're here to share with us some sort of galactic wisdom, give us warnings, or to help mankind. Talking about my opinions, Ken, of course, I don't think this is the case. For the most part, I believe that they're lying to us. They're giving abductees false information about their intentions. What do they want, my friend? Because I'm gonna say this: that anything that would come into my home, anywhere I go, and take me without me willingly wanting to, it's definitely not my friend, or has no great intention.
Yes, well, I think there are several components to this subject matter that need serious investigation. You're correct. We've been given no information to advance our species in any way or form. And I do not speak in terms of, perhaps there are intelligences which do have our best interests at heart, but I don't think we've come across them yet. And the Greys, interestingly, do operate in secrecy. Now, what's interesting is that as I said to you, there seems to be 2 components, 2 connections to this. And I was interested in how the Greys are able to take us through solid matter. And is it possible that when we look at the subject matter of ufology, we are so confused because we are looking at it in one category and leaving out the other elements of the paranormal? And this was what led me into the afterlife, conscious survival. So the Greys are not able to reproduce, and people have told me what they are, where they come from. Well, good luck. I'm glad you found your answers, but we still don't know. We only have theoretical content, but they cannot reproduce. And I wondered why it was they were interested in a species that can reproduce. And they're interested in hybridization. I mean, I didn't see any of that, but I did speak to Dr. David Jacobs in Phoenix when I was there. Not speaking at the conference, but I was there to visit, and he was a lovely gentleman. And I wondered, well, the Greys seem to come across as a blank canvas. They have no interest in love. They don't understand about color, taste, smell, all these things that make us what we are. So we're obviously looking for something that makes us tick, because they seem to be so far removed from what we represent on a biological, reproductive level. And my understanding is that going even deeper is that we have spirit, soul, for want of a better word. This is all coming out now. It's not contained rigidly within condensed programming from the system we serve to induce fear and mental subjugation. But is it possible that, because we are souls, that we originate from source? And we're still trying to work that one out. But we do know there is survival beyond this level of reality. And we create memories. And if we, for instance, as a human species, began to clone ourselves without coming through that process of natural reproduction, where I believe all the inherent memories, even on a mental level or a blueprint within the psychic level, come through, that will be dangerous. So it's possible, it's conceivable to assume that perhaps the Greys are coming through from a dimension or gravitating to a lower field within our reality, and have connected with a species that can reproduce, and are interested in how we're able to do that. Now, the other thing is that the way that they do it, because the way that they abduct someone seems to mirror the near-death state, certainly in near-death experience studies, examining which I did one area back in 1996 to the other. It's almost identical, but they're operating on separate levels. But I do agree with you. People say, well, they're physical. They come into our reality. Well, yes, of course they will, because if you are lowering your level of vibration in order to get into this realm, you need to be matched by its frequency. And interestingly, just as a side note here, I think this phenomena has in some way tried to guide our species, maybe for their own ends, in terms of these UFO crashes, which seem to occur in remote regions. And what's interesting, I know one wonderful researcher, Mark Holley here in England, who's got a piece of debris from a crashed UFO here in England many years ago. And what's interesting, and you hear these reports, if they are to be believed, which I do believe that they are, that there is a lot of composite within the material that's been discovered, but there's a little something that's not. And I wondered whether or not this intelligence, wherever it's coming from, actually replicates itself using our materials as it comes into our dimension of reality, then infuses something, a little bit of itself in there, and leaving these bits and pieces. Because people have argued with me saying, oh, Roswell, it's advanced us to where we are. Yes, I'm not disputing that. But when the craft, if it was a craft or the object came down, it was just enough for us to understand, to a degree, I think, the workings, microchipped, laser technology, just enough for us to kind of just tweak to advance maybe 20 or 30 years later. So I don't know. I mean, people will tell you what they know and how it is, but I'm open to all forms of speculation. But I think going back to what you're saying, Diego, to conclude your question, no, they haven't helped us. It's all deceit.
Yes.
My twin brother even argues that says, that we could have advanced so much. And people will say, well, no, because the elite have all that technology and they're flying off here, there and everywhere and leaving us with the toys through that technology. That could be possible, but we have not been helped. World War II, no. World War I, no. So, and people, just to finish off here, have said to me, oh, it's because they don't want to violate a universal code. Well, they've broken that code already because they've come in. So I think your question is important, but no, I don't think they've helped us in any way or form. I think they're helping themselves, most definitely, yeah.
And no, and I'm glad that you said that, because it brings to another part of the story with abductions, to where when someone's, I'll say the word taken, and they're taken to another location, either they're floated out or physically taken. I would say that perhaps they're not doing this on their craft, because if they have to go off world or something, I don't know if our bodies will be able to even survive such a trip. Now, in my opinion, I think maybe there are locations around the world where they had these done, and they're actually, these experimentations are probably being done right on Earth.
Yes, I mean, well, I said earlier that they seem to be much closer to home. And we have been led to believe in a lot of testimony that from witnesses, abductees, experiencers, that they are coming from star systems, physical planets, Zeta Reticula, Alpha Centauri, wherever that may be. But I'm not so sure. And I think that they are operating on an interdimensional level. People say, well, what do you mean interdimensional? Well, if you take the signals to your mobile phone, they are surrounding us, but our senses can't perceive that reality. It is only until those signals hit the material aspect of that device, which is used to translate the information, then we see it as a reality. So I think and feel that it's possible that certain intelligences have got bases here on a physical level, if I use that word lightly. And it makes sense to assume that perhaps the ocean, which is mostly uncharted, is where they would be safest, is the safest bet. This also brings in a lot of confusion with regards to ufology in a universal way, because we have the physical hardware, the nuts and bolts, and then we have the abduction phenomena, which seems to operate on a completely different level. Now, if the Greys were able to use this technology to abduct someone, my brother quite rightfully pointed this out. Why can't they just beam them up like they do on Star Trek? They wouldn't need to come near the individual. I mean, I didn't have anyone near me. It was when I was being returned that I had them with me or by my side, the Greys that were. So that is interesting. And also the way that they're able to transport the individual. They have to be in close proximity, and there seems to be some kind of psychic connection that they make with you to arrest you, to bring them into that reality. And we've heard stories as well where the Greys have been able to bring the abductees' dead loved ones on board the craft. So they are magicians of the mind. They know how we work. They know how we tick, which is interesting. But they whatever they're after, they still don't seem to have it. And I believe that this is something that's been going on for a very long time. And I also believe there's another part to this, which is ancient, which is old. So I think we could be dealing with an ancient force, an old force, that gravitates into these different guises and is here to try and find something within us to promote or to help itself. Certainly, if they are, which I've heard before, helping our elite, for want of a better word, the Illuminati, or those in power and control, it wouldn't surprise me, because a lot of this phenomena does seem to operate within the dark arts, with conjuring and sorcery and that type of thing. And this is why I think, going back into the past, the churches were dead, excuse the expression, dead against anyone using their mind outside the box. God forbid, because you were either burnt or drowned, and this led in this whole control mechanism of consciousness. And it could be that those people at the top know how to bring these forces in or operate with them. That's another story entirely. But without sounding too conspiratorial, I believe that there are connections to be made in all these fields. And just saying here, shockingly, I did go on a TV program once with Nick Pope and Georgina Bruni, the late Georgina Bruni, who wrote the book You Can't Tell the People. And her experience had been with Baroness Thatcher. She used to be a prime minister here, and Georgina Bruni had been at one of her meals, and she approached Baroness Thatcher and asked her about UFOs. And Baroness Thatcher said, don't quote me on here, line for line, word for word, but it's around this way. She said, UFOs, first you have to get your facts right. And when you do, that's when you'll find why we can't tell the people. And I believe even our connection with Parliament here, government, I and myself and a good friend, Nigel Ross, who's also a ufologist, a good man, we wrote to Parliament to ask them to, let's meet, let's talk about this, let's see if we can get to some kind of disclosure. And I didn't get any disclosure. In fact, all I got was silence. And these people are meant to be there to protect us, to be there for you, So it's a mystery, isn't it? I think this goes really very, very deep. And I think so deep that the system that we serve will find it very hard, because they've already programmed the public. And now things are coming out of the bag. or being pulled out of the hat, as so to speak. And they're going to find it very difficult if disclosure was apparent by saying, yes, UFOs are real and so is alien contact, but we got a problem. And, that problem runs really deep. And, of course, most of the public will not buy that. I mean, heck, you just say on the news there's a water shortage, petrol or fuel shortage. It's like something from Sir David Attenborough's Natural Programs, when the apes go wild. So
Yes.
There you have it.
And it's interesting because sometimes I tend to have, of course, different opinions. The more information you get, the more your mind opens up to other possibilities of what things can happen.
Yeah.
It's one of those things to where the world governments most likely act as one. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. There's a possibility that they all work in conjunction with each other. And let's say the extraterrestrials are basically ordering them not to say anything. And perhaps maybe the world governments might be scared to divulge any information for fear of punishment or retribution from these beings.
Yes, that is possible, indeed, because who are the controllers really? If we go back into antiquity, we find that these rulers were not good. They were very controlling and very destructive. And in the original codices, their creation, the human that I believe was an amalgamation of the ape and part of them infused together to create a reproductive species, which is interesting because originally we were not meant to reproduce. And of course, one of the commanders, as it were, Enlil and Enki, both of them, going back into antiquity, and this is all within the codices. This isn't something that's been made up. They allowed the human to reproduce, and of course it got out of hand and became destructive. Now, if these overlords have been in another system of reality and created another race of servants, i.e. the Greys, who were not able to reproduce, this is another theory we can take into account. They seem to have found us, and they're interested in, it's like a bit like Prometheus now, it's like, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Who created whom? So, I'm just saying it's something we can play around with in terms of theoretical content. But I do believe that the system that we serve is really, stepping up with regards to this conscious subjugation, individuality, which the Greys do not seem to have. And because they operate like all elements within the paranormal, we could even assume that they are connected on some levels, which I have thought of and written about within the astral state, where, the astral planes, where thought is real, and the creation of them coming through on certain levels within that state of reality. But the question is, with regards to the system that we have, it is determined now to create some kind of transhumanism, which is taking away our individuality, which is taking away our rights. You can see what's going on, and it's being done in a very subtle way. So whatever this force is extremely patient, absolutely, and it will reward its puppets, those that govern at the top, very well. It will give them all the money they want. It will give them all the gongs they want. It will give them all what they want. And this is another area that really annoys me and slightly misdirecting away from the UFO subject, but it's about us as humans. We are so amazing and unique. Every single one of us are incredible. But this system has systematically dumbed down the masses and will not utilize the very best of those individuals to help them and us to evolve, to progress. They want nothing of it. So you can see through the way that the political arena works that there is an agenda, and it wouldn't surprise me if those echelons at the top, those human echelons, well, I hope they are, they're probably not, try and tear the mask off and see what's behind it, that they are working perhaps in coalition with this other alternative darker force, which has its own agenda. Because if you think about it, do not do this and do not do that. Do not use a Ouija board. Do not use clairvoyance. It's all a load of old rubbish. And yet, most of these, and you can find this out, most of these people at the top, the rich families like the Rockefellers, Bilderbergs, one of them was telling people not to use holistic therapy. And then he was having it used. One of them, check it out.
Yeah, it's interesting because if we're talking about church or religion. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing to where I remember, because I came up, my first experience with church, I came from a Pentecostal church background, more Protestant. And a lot of the things was they really didn't want you to get too much into anything else other than what they're teaching. And I don't think they had any nefarious reasons to do it, but I think they just wanted to protect their flock because they don't want you to conjure up anything that may control you down the road, So, and God bless them for that. It's great. But I think it's one of the things with mankind. I don't think that, I'll call it this experiment of them creating humans, is going as great for them as they think, because we're very resilient. We can survive catastrophes, floods, or judgments from gods, and we still come back and somehow survive and reach a certain peak of intelligence or technology till we're knocked back down. So hopefully we're not back into that cycle again. And at least not in my lifetime, hopefully. And with
it's interesting because it's interesting because every time that we go through a period of enlightenment or people are starting to feel good about themselves, the system will throw something negative our way to bring and subject consciousness. And we know about a lot of these operations within the military corps of how they know how certain frequencies and wavelengths can disrupt a human's, neurological processing in terms of the mind, the way that the mind works. So I believe the system knows people like you, me, and many other hundreds and thousands of people who are overwoken, and they're watching you. And they're aware of what you're doing because they want you to be part of the sheep. And every time you try to pull outside of that bubble, it's almost like, well, they'll sell everything in their way. They'll flick a switch and it's like, we'll get you back down there again. So this, as I said, this goes really deep in terms of not just UFOs. It also encompasses the psychic part, creation, also with control and mental subjugation. There are all connections to be made here, but it's so vast that the system is so supremely confident that you will not in any way put the pieces together, that you will not know what's going on, that you won't know the reality behind this, because they seem so cocky when they talk about UFOs on mainstream media. Yes, there we are. There's the physical crafts and these little beings coming out the craft and abducting someone. The truth is far more startling, far more terrifying to a degree in terms of the process involved. And when you are in the nest of that activity, when you have been involved in it, it's a completely different story. Totally. People say, who haven't seen a UFO, it's this. When you're in that situation, it changes everything. It is not as glamorous. In fact, it does hold you in suspense, awe to a degree, not the abduction, but the appearance of the UFOs, in awe, in wonderment. And I've spoken to Steve Mirror and Barry Fitzgerald, two researchers, brilliant researchers here in the UK, and they're of the same opinion. The phenomena captivates you, and once it does, it's got you. Until we wake up and think, hang on a minute, there's something not right here.
And it happens to you in the most unpredictable times in your life.
That's right.
And before we go, and I like to ask a lot of the guests this because they all have different opinions. Some wish not to answer, but I think it's a very important question, talking about bringing the wrong kind of attention, or I'll say the outside forces knowing that we know and perhaps maybe making an appearance in our life, trying to either talk us out of it or try to put us down a few pegs, to silence us, to sort of say, when Terrestrial Trespassers came out, and you do a lot of interviews, and you also have a podcast or a radio show with your brother, probably discussing these sort of issues as well. My question is this. Have you, talking about getting the right or wrong kind of attention, doesn't matter on this question, has anybody contacted you, give you a call or an email and say, hey, either knock it off, or we're going to come and not say much as ruin your life, but we're going to make things very difficult for you?
No, not on a one-to-one level, not personally, but I don't claim anything. I am very grounded, and I will report only facts. And I'm, like many other people, very honest, very grounded, very, that's the way I am. People know I'm no nonsense. But I have felt, I have sensed that there are people in the background who are trying very hard to denounce you. And, although I've got a thick skin, I'm no fool. I'm very empathic and very understanding with everyone, and I will help anyone. But it hurts, seriously hurts, when you're just trying to bring a small, tiny theoretical part to the table to saying, well, let's have a look at this and see if this makes any sense. But, I have some wonderful research friends, not just here in England or in Germany or in Russia or in the good United States of America, your great country. I have wonderful researchers and people who are very loyal, but there have been people who are trying very hard to bring you down. And I will say to them, well, that's all well and good, but if you want to talk about it, you come to me. You don't go through other people and start putting all this stuff on social media to try and denounce my character, my personality, when you don't know who I am. You come to me, but they won't. So I have heard on a good authority as well that someone who I spoke to that said that, and without sounding like building up or pumping up your profile, because I've got no ego in terms of that. I don't seek limelight, and people say, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that. But it's the only way that you can get your work out, because you enjoy it. And as researchers, we don't eat off gold plates. I mean, we scrape the barrel, and it's a good scraping of the barrel because I enjoy it. I enjoy the chase. I enjoy the mystery. I want to find out like everyone else. And you'll find that within the circumference of this whole world of UFO and psychic research, it's not very good grounds with other people. All we want to do is work together and pull everything together, our resources together. But one guy said to me that if people really knew, he got this from good authority from the FBI, if people really knew what was going on in the world, they wouldn't want to leave their front door. And that is coming from someone I cannot say on here that I trust with my entire life. So you can see that people like yourself and myself and many other good researchers, I know that there's some doctors in America that have been watched, not just through military, but also through bugging, that type of thing. Yes, it happens, it's prevalent. But with me personally, one-to-one, no, I haven't had anyone come up to me and warn me. But I have felt, let's just put it this way, that people, someone somewhere is trying to bring me down and my brother down. But I'm still standing. So you could do, the only way they're going to do that is by death. And even then, I'll still try and come back. Trust me on that one. I do have a sense of humor.
Yes. But on the positive aspect of that once, and I've had this experience, once people figure out or learn that I'll use the word the real deal, that you're actually there to give people the information, look at the facts, and give your opinions. It's amazing, though. And I found this through the years I've been doing this or been into this kind of thing, that the amount of people that eventually down the road, once they're not scared to approach you, how they open up about their experiences and tell you their stories.
Oh, yes. Yes. I've had hundreds literally open up. And I think through character or definition of character, people know who they can trust. And I've had so many people, and it really is endearing. Some have positive experiences, some not so positive. And we're trying to truly establish what it is that we're dealing with on an empirical level of conscious awareness. And we have to look at both sides. So I had one guy who told me and his wife that the only reason that I experienced a negative encounter was because I was a negative person. And he had everything all worked out. And I said to him, well, sir, can I just explain to you that I am the least negative person? I'm a curious individual, and I'm very interested in how things work and trying to put things together on a theoretical level as well. But I'm not negative. So you'll get those who will tell you how it is and what it is, and so on and so forth. But I do also know that there is a pecking order in terms of not just the psychic department of investigations, but also within UFOlogy. That doesn't interest me. What interests me is me being in there and helping people, trying to understand, like you and many others, what we're dealing with. And that is a war within itself. It's not just dealing with the subject matter at hand. It's also dealing with our very own kind. And we have to be honest here, because a lot of them on our level are not on our level. And, so that comes part and parcel, but it shouldn't be that way. And as I said, if you're honest and you're truthful and you're grounded and you're open-minded, then so much the better. But as I said, it doesn't really bother me now. You get attacked in everything, whatever you do. People just look at you and they don't like the look of you. It's like, well, you haven't done anything to them. But the most interesting part, the most important part, which every single researcher on this planet is doing, whether famous or not, it doesn't bother me, is we are looking for the holy grail of what this is about. And it gives us hope, Diego. It gives us hope because it tells us that we are much more than biological reproductive automatons with a sell-by date. And it also reminds us that we are serving a system which has categorically lied to its public. And I underline that word, lied. And you can see this already in light of the new claims that's come forward. Oh, it's a circus act. But I admire David Grush, and I admire all those people who have taken this, George Knapp and the others that's involved in this. I admire them because they are fighting for that truth. And when you look at these men's faces, you can see it on them, on that. That is truly, you just want to go and give them a hug, say thank you so much for helping push us forward to let the public know that not everything is mechanical. There's something more here, and we need to split this open and remind the system that we serve that you have lied to your public. That's what they've done. And this is all coming out. This is why they're so at pains to keep the lid down at it, because they programmed us, many of us. So, they haven't helped themselves. It's a catch-22 situation their end.
Yeah, beautifully said, my friend. I really appreciate your directness and honesty about the whole thing. And with that being said, for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about what it is that you do, purchase their copy of Terrestrial Trespassers, listen to your radio show along with your brother Twin Souls, where can they find all this information?
Yes, I have some websites, www.thekinsellatwins.com. It's quite simple. That's our shared website, and www.philipkinsella.com, which is my psychic website. And also the books are on Amazon, where you can buy everything. Most of my books are out of print because they were published by other publishers through contracts. But you can get the books on online. So yeah, very easy. Yeah.
Excellent, my friend. Thank you for being on Let's Find Out with me, Diego. And I look forward to having you back on hopefully later this year, because I know you have a lot of things going on. And before I go, what is the next project you're working on?
Well, I have completed several articles already on UFOlogies, and I'm very grateful to the Italian magazine X Times, because they've been super and superb and a haunted magazine here in England. And Philip Mantle, a mentor, a lovely man, gentleman. My brother and I admire him very much, and many other ufologists, Paul Sinclair here in England. I'm working on a new book which deals with the reincarnation process of the soul consciousness, not the fairy tale version, but the raw version, finding out what we're here for, and if there's any claims to be made with regards to the process of reincarnation, incarnation. I believe it, but you have to address this to the public, because it's not like you're convincing the public. You have to bring the facts to the table. So it's interesting about certain adepts that are able or have been able to incarnate in our realm without going through the process of reproduction, and looking at the astral planes, which might answer some truly extraordinary questions as to what a lot of this phenomena and where it's operating from, what it is and where it's operating from. So we have to look outside the box, as I said, but that's, and then I've got another UFO book, 2 UFO books that I'm working on that will be completed in a couple of years' time.
Excellent. Our journey continues, my brother. Thank you for being on the show. And
thank you,
once
Diego.
These works come out, please come back. I'd love to share more of your story with our listeners.
Thank you very much. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful to you, Diego. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is now on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the shows on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania. All content for Let's Find Out is property of CoHostDiego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.